Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
He is Dr. Austin Crow, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, joining us here this morning for a little inside the training room. How you doing, Austin?
I'm doing great.
Hey, so first off, what'd you think of your Vikings picks in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little surprised. We went to offensive line, but it's certainly a hole that we had to fill. And I think, one of the nice things is Ohio State had an injury to their offensive tackle in the middle of the season, and he stepped over and played some tackle. So I think that's going to be a little bit of a benefit for us because he may be able to fill in for Darisaw while he's coming back from his injury still, and then switch over to guard. So I think it's a versatile pick right there. But overall, it was a good draft. I mean, we obviously didn't have a ton of picks, and we did some maneuvering later in the draft. But overall, I was pretty happy. Yeah, nice.
Let's start off with basketball in the NBA. So you had texted me right after it happened with Damian Lillard with the Achilles injury. So first thing, do you think there was, I believe it was on the other leg, would it have any relation to his blood clot in that calf muscle, or is that just completely separate from that?
I do believe that's separate. I don't think that that's likely directly linked. Now, it could be linked in the sense that, he had a little bit of disuse, so he was, kind of got out of his cycle because they'll shut the leg down for a little bit. And so my assumption is that maybe he had a little bit of, tendonitis built up, or the muscle got a little tighter, quote, deconditioned. So perhaps it could be linked to that. I mean, obviously Achilles ruptures, unfortunately, can happen to anyone. His mechanism was totally classic for it. That's why, I texted you right away when I saw it. I mean, we call it an eccentric load. So the weight's coming down, the body's catching the weight, so your ankle's getting dorsiflexed up, so the tendon's being stretched. And as it's being stretched, the muscle's firing against it. That's called an eccentric load, and that's the classic mechanism. And so as soon as you saw it and you saw him go down and then try step up and fall down again, it's just, at that point, it's basically guaranteed what it was, unfortunately.
So what's kind of a time – because I feel like this is a big wrench into the Bucks offseason plans because everybody's talking about Giannis. Is he going to get traded or should they move on and such? But, I mean, with Dame now tearing his Achilles in the postseason, I feel like that's a big, okay, what do we do now at this point? Is it safe to say he could miss all of next season with his age and such, or –
I don't think so. I think he'll be back at partway through the season, but I mean, it's a legit minimum 6, more like 9-month recovery. And, if there's any hiccups along the way, that could certainly change the timeline as well. But most of the time they heal pretty well. I mean, obviously this harkens back to A-Raj and, when he said he was going to come back at, 8 weeks and 12 weeks. I mean, which is from the get-go, I did not believe that for a second. And I don't think Dame will try to do any kind of crazy timeline like that. Doesn't need to, right? Because he's not going to be in season. So do I think he could get back next year? I do. But you're right. I mean, how do you plan for that? How does the guy recover from that? Most of the time, people do come back pretty well from an Achilles injury. Do they lose a little step? Maybe a little bit, but there's plenty of athletes that have came back and, Kevin Durant, I mean, he's still been a pretty explosive player after his. I mean, it's not like he can't come back, but it takes a lot of work. But these pro athletes certainly are able to push themselves and their bodies heal, and they get every little bell and whistle along their recovery pathway too.
So this might be a weird question, but just, seeing Dave's reaction when he went down and just kind of his facial expression, it almost felt like, it didn't hurt, but he knew something happened. Is that kind of common when it comes to an Achilles tear?
Absolutely. I mean, most people say it didn't hurt. Some say it doesn't hurt at all, zero pain, which is crazy, right? You'd think rupturing a tendon would be very, very painful. A vast majority of people say it doesn't hurt at all. They'll often say they feel like they got kicked in the back of the leg, so they'll turn around and look to see who kicked me, and then they try to stand, and then boom, they go down again because the Achilles is in half. So, it is very classic. And then people definitely know something's not right. I mean, he's stepped on his leg a million times in his life, and every single time the calf muscle's been attached to his heel. And then the first time he steps up, it's not. And so you go to put weight on it, and there's nothing there. And so they'll just go, again, that up and then right back down. I mean, we've seen it, unfortunately, many times. And so they definitely know something serious happened. So when I see patients in clinic with this injury, it is that classic story over and over again. was jumping and landing or explosive step, whatever, felt a big pop, didn't hurt, can't walk, and they'll almost always say, like, I knew something was really wrong. Like, you just know. Your body's like, that's not right.
Weird. We had Mark, one of our listeners, Mark, wanted me to ask you, because we were talking about Jair Alexander, and remember last year he had that knee issue, and he was practicing, but then he wasn't playing, and then we found out it was a PCL injury, and then he ended up having surgery on it later on in the season. And Mark wanted me to ask your thoughts on it, because he's worried about, potentially with that knee injury, is he fully recovered? Will he ever be? With a PCL injury and such, I mean, because I think it seems like the discord between Jair and the team was the coaches thought he could play. Jair didn't think like he could play, and that's kind of where some of that drama is, and then he ended up having surgery on that PCL injury. So, I mean, what's the timeline recovery for something like that? Is there any concern with Jair and his ability to return to the field with a PCL injury?
I mean, anytime you have a knee injury, there's always a concern, right? I mean, so it's not zero. It's because for him, this surgery was not a PCL reconstruction, right? So the question was what was done, and I don't think they ever disclosed, to my knowledge, what was actually done. So my assumption was either cleaning up a meniscus tear or maybe a small cartilage injury that came along with it. Because when you do injure one of the major ligaments in the knee, and PCL certainly one of them, you often will get associated injuries with it. So if you take a look at an isolated PCL, so let's say it was just the PCL injury, that ligament does have a pretty good to kind of get back and get really to pre-injury levels. So if it truly was an isolated PCL, then I would expect him to get back and get back fully. And so perhaps that's what the initial thought was. And sometimes that's what the initial MRI will show. But in reality, maybe there was an additional meniscus tear or a small cartilage injury that was giving him some troubles. They got a second MRI and said, oh, now we have this problem. Then they scoped the knee and cleaned that area up. And then, of course, the recovery from that is also, I mean, he's not the first NFL player that's had a disconnect between what he feels like he can do and what the team feels like. There's a couple years ago, remember, there was a Jet offensive lineman that ended up having surgery, and the team, I think, cut him.
Yeah.
And there was a big suit over that. So, I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes the team doctors and the patient, in this case it's a player, have different opinions on what they can do. So to really answer your question though explicitly, I think that the odds of him having long-term issues with this are going to be low. I think he should be able to bounce back. Again, the PCL should be healed fully by now. And then certainly all the conditioning that he's done should have, any additional muscle compensation to accommodate any maybe little residual laxity in the knee. Now, assuming he didn't have a major cartilage injury, and it was just a small meniscus cleanup, the knee should be great. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that, truthfully.
Going back to the draft, because there was one player that fell into the second round, and according to, I think it was Adam Schefter, said it was injury concerns, and it was Will Johnson, the corner out of Michigan. And there was like a list of injuries that was reported. It was a hamstring injury. It was a knee issue that teams apparently had an issue with, and then a toe injury. They said it was a torn ligament in October. Is that potentially a turf toe? That one that nobody wants that you've had before?
Yeah, certainly it could be. I mean, so they did, and that was. I mean, you asked me about the draft. Honestly, that's where I thought we were going to go, and actually maybe you guys as well.
Yeah. When
I saw him dropping, you're like, all right, he's top 10 potential, and all of a sudden he's in the 20s, and both of our teams have need for secondary. I was like, man. And when you guys passed on him, and then we passed on him, I'm like, there's got to be, and we've talked about that. I mean, the Joe Public, we have an idea, kind of, but these teams are absolutely doing their due diligence. So he probably had multiple exams, even probably MRIs on every one of these injuries. And so the teams really have an idea. And it tells you that something came up on those. So I doubt it was the hamstring. I believe his junior year he tore his ACL. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think that's what he did. And then, this semi-undisclosed foot injury or toe injury, which certainly turf toe would be on that list. Clearly, one of those things has created a red flag that teams like, we're just not willing to spend that. Because, I mean, he certainly has all the potential in the world. I mean, he was a fantastic corner, played at a high level, and he had all the accolades to be a high pick. So there's something there that caught people's eyes. So, I mean, a bad turf toe injury certainly can be. I mean, those unfortunately have been career-ending. I mean, that's really what finally kind of killed Deion Sanders' career, is his turf toe injury, for example. So, and especially at a position like corner, I mean, where they need to be explosive, that can really hamper that push-off. So if it's that, or maybe there's something on the ACL, maybe he had a cartilage injury on that knee and they're getting MRI saying, he says the knee's good, but we see a big cartilage injury and we think this is going to come back and bite him later. So, there's plenty of guys who've had those end their careers as well. So again, something popped up that we're just not aware of, and certainly teams won't disclose it, right? So they don't talk about it. But when you see that drop, I mean, it happens every year. There's guys that just drop in the draft, and there's usually some answer that either we don't know about at the time, or maybe we never know about, but it's generally something medical.
Yeah, okay. I mean, we see like Jordan Travis, right? The Jets quarterback, former Florida State's quarterback who had to retire because he just couldn't come back from those type of injuries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in medicine is amazing, and we're able to do so many amazing things to reconstruct the body, but there are just some things we just can't do. And sometimes even surgeries that have a high success rate. I mean, I always tell my patients in this business, there's 0 things that are 100%, 0.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's even a standard ACL, or a standard meniscus surgery. There can always things that happen. So once you start talking about more complex injuries, that's certainly always a higher risk. And of course, these people aren't trying to get back to shuffleboard, right? They're trying to get back at the highest level with playing with the best athletes in the world. And so the margin for error is so small. So when they see that, and it's like, for some people, getting back at 70, 80% is good enough to get back to daily life, but you can't play at the NFL at that level. So there are guys that have injuries that just, unfortunately, sometimes they can't bounce back from. So it's the hard part of our job when we talk to athletes and we see the recovery process just not get to that finish line we're all looking for. And so it's part of the business, and it's something that we have to just work through and adjust. And sometimes you can do an additional procedure to help get them there, but sometimes you can't, and it's just the end of a career,
Last question for you, and it's kind of putting your scouting cap on here, Doctor. So Packers drafted a couple Longhorns. I know you're a Texas guy.
Absolutely.
Matthew Golden, obviously, with the first pick, and then Baron Sorrell, who I think has already turned into a fan favorite because he was at the draft and, just was living it up in Green Bay on day 3. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, maybe Matthew Golden-esque with that speed. Give us a little bit of a scouting report from what you saw in his college days.
Yeah, I mean, Golden, I certainly know his game a lot more. I mean, I watched a lot of Texas games this season. I mean, he has elite speed. It's what I think. What do you run, a
4.29? Yeah.
So, I mean, which is just blazing. But he has real field speed as well. So I mean, some guys are able to do it, and it's like the classic Raiders pick, right? The guy who runs an amazing 40-yard and 1 drafts. I'm like, well, why didn't he do anything in college? Well, Golden did. I mean, Golden had numbers to back it up. So he's a good route runner. He has good hands, and he just has that elite speed in creating separation. So I unfortunately think that was a good pick for you guys. So I think he's gonna wreak some havoc in the NFC North here for some seasons. And obviously, getting Love weapons is something that's been a priority for a while, right? I mean, the Packers fans have been clamoring for receivers for only the last decade or so. So
2 decades.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, exactly. So I think he's a phenomenal pick. When I saw you guys get him, I also thought he was maybe going to go higher than where he went too. So I thought that was a good value pick and a need pick for you guys. So I think he'll be a really good receiver in the NFL.
All right. He's Dr. Austin Crowe, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine. Dude, appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy the weekends, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Sounds great. Have a good one.
You too. There you go. Dr. Crowe, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.